Hello, everyone. My name is Juanita Alvarez. I'm the Americas Regional Head for the World Green Building Council. Thank you so much for joining us in this webinar. Thank you for taking the time. This is going to be a webinar with our project partner BASE and with some great keynote speakers that we will be talking about how cooling as a service can accelerate transition to net zero carbon buildings. As you know, the WorldGBC is a membership organization where we have around 70 green building councils around the world. And within the Americas, we have a specific project that's called the Cities Climate Action Project, supported by the Building Efficiency Accelerator, where our main interest is to promote energy efficiency and net zero carbon roadmaps for cities and national governments. That is why this webinar is very important for us, and the partnership with BASE and cooling as a service is a key element in the development of our efforts. So thank you so much for joining. And we have different speakers from all across the world that will be talking to this particular topics. They will be presented in detail by Carla from BASE. And I just wanted to give you a few general instructions for all of you to know throughout the webinar. So please, if you have any questions, you can use the chat box that you can see on your panel control. And we will review the questions, and at the end of the presentations, we will have some time for Q&A. This webinar will also be recorded and shared with all of the participants that are joining us today, and the slides will be available as well at the end of the webinar. If you need further information from the topics that will be presented, we will be sharing a follow-up email with further details and information that we hope you can find very useful. So I want to thank all of our speakers. I want to give a special thank you to our partner, BASE and Cooling as a Service. And thank you everyone for joining us. Now I will give the word to Carla. Thank you.
Thanks, Juanita, and thanks to the World Green Building Council. Good morning, everyone. I'm Carla, Senior Climate and Environment Finance Specialist at BASE. That's the Basel Agency for Sustainable Energy. I've been working for over 2 decades on sustainable development, focusing on climate change projects, mainly on adaptation and mitigation, but also on climate finance, and with a background in the financial sector. During the last 7 years, I've been involved working with BASE, developing innovative business models to scale up the adoption of climate change solutions, specifically energy efficiency and renewable energy. And as part of that effort, we've developed the Cooling as a Service model. I'll be the moderator of this webinar today. So first thing that I would like to ask you is to encourage you to send questions via the chat, as Juanita explained. Please indicate to whom you're asking the questions. That will facilitate the work at the end of the webinar. All these questions will be answered. If not now live, we will send questions and answers afterwards in a thank you email, together also with the links to the webinar. And also we are gonna send you a link with the registration for our newsletter in case you wanna keep informed of all the progress that we're doing with Cooling as a Service all over the world, and also be updated of all the events we are launching, including even an e-summit. So let's start. I'm very pleased in this case to introduce the 4 speakers that we have today. In first place, we will have Thomas Modmans. Thomas, who is my colleague in BASE, leads the CAS initiative. He will present the Cooling as a Service model and the Cooling as a Service initiative and its progress. Thomas will be followed by Chris Elizondo and Martin Mendez. Chris and Martin represent 2 of the 5 companies selected as part of the Cooling as a Service incubator. Chris comes from the Grupo Clima in Costa Rica and Martin from Grupo BGH in Argentina. They will talk about their interest in incorporating Cooling as a Service in their businesses, and about their experience with the incubator, each within their particular circumstances. We will finalize then with the presentation of Alfredo Nicastro, who represents MGM Innova Group, who will talk about their experience with the sale of cooling as a service. Okay. So Thomas, he's gonna start speaking about like cooling as a service. Thomas, as I mentioned to you, is my colleague at Base. He's an engineer with substantial experience in Latin America, in Africa, and Asia. He's been leading the Cooling as a Service initiative as a whole and has really, I would say, very proudly taken the initiative to a very good position where we are right now working with different countries across the world. He will give you more information about that. So I leave you now with Thomas. Please, Thomas, go ahead.
Thank you, Carla. Hello, everyone. So as Carla introduced, I'm Thomas, and I've been leading the Cooling as a Service initiative for 2 years now. And before I start talking about the model, I'd like to give a short introduction about the Basel Agency for Sustainable Energy, which is an organization where Carla and I work for. So BASE, or the Basel Agency for Sustainable Energy, is an NGO based in Basel, Switzerland. And we are a not-for-profit foundation and specialized partner of United Nations Environment. We were founded in 2001, and we have been designing, developing, and implementing financial mechanisms and strategies to unlock investments in sustainable energy, including renewable energy and energy efficiency, and more generally, climate change solutions. And since about a couple of years, we started focusing heavily on cooling through collaborations with the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program. And actually, there was a report published by the IEA now almost 2 years ago, which shows that investments in cooling will be considerable in the upcoming 30 years, about 6.9 trillion, which is about 230 billion per year. And the aim is really to have a big portion of these investments channeled towards green cooling or clean and efficient cooling. Why? Because cooling has an important impact on the environment. There are two elements. First, the energy consumption and the refrigerants used by the cooling system. Currently, cooling systems or air conditioning actually alone, excluding even refrigeration, consume 10% of the global electricity, and this will triple to reach 30% in 2050. So this diagram explains a little bit the different, or shows the respective costs of operation and of investment. So you can see that a very small portion is actually the cost of the equipment itself, and the remaining life cycle cost is mostly operating costs. So if you look at 12 years of this equipment, you can see that more than 90% of the costs are actually related to operation and maintenance, which means that if you save even only a small portion of this electricity, you quickly pay back your investment on a more efficient system. But still, we are seeing that there are not many, or the investment is not happening as fast as we would expect in more efficient systems. And we have a look now at why this is happening. We have identified through our work in the past years a couple of key barriers, and the first one being, of course, the higher upfront cost of more efficient technologies. So they're competing against cheaper technologies that are also less efficient. That's one. Secondly, many enterprises have a lack in trust of the actual savings achieved, so the performance of the system, which might not, in that case, justify an investment in a more efficient system. And finally, many enterprises prefer to invest in their core business, and cooling is normally not part of the core business. So in this context, the cooling as a service model is actually a very interesting model, because all these barriers give space to a totally new approach of cooling. And what is cooling as a service? Really, it is what we call servitization. And servitization is a mega trend that is not new in itself. It has been existing for many years in different industries, and you probably know it best from the printing industry. Xerox has been implementing pay-per-use models for many years already, and in which customers don't buy the printer but basically paper copy. And other industries have been doing it as well. For example, Rolls-Royce has been offering power by the hour instead of selling the engines to aircrafts. And the solar industry also had a big shift in the last decade, thanks to power purchase agreements, which enable customers to purchase the kilowatt hours of solar produced instead of actually investing in the solar panel. And now we're seeing it in new sectors, in other sectors. So for example, cars, there's some companies like Volvo which offer subscription programs to their customers in which they don't need to actually purchase the car anymore. And even lighting. So the airport of Amsterdam, Schiphol, signed a contract with Philips in which they pay lighting by the hour. So they actually didn't purchase the fixtures of the lighting, but they just receive the lighting, the service of lighting, and pay for that service. And right now we are basically working to bring this to the next step with cooling. It has been implemented already in cooling, but we are aiming to accelerate this and to make this more accessible to different stakeholders in the market, because we expect the cooling as a service, which is the same principle, to also be to take up quite rapidly across markets. So the cooling as a service model was endorsed by the Global Innovation Lab for Climate Finance last year, which is a large group of investors and governments, so from the private and public sector, which chose among more than 250 ideas, 5 leading ideas to which can really have a big potential to drive climate change, climate action. And cooling as a service was selected last year. So this is it's a big reward, a big award. And the way the model works, it is a pay-per-use model in which customers pay per unit of cooling that they actually consume. The providers own the equipment and they operate and maintain the equipment. So for the customer, what has been before a capital expenditure becomes now an operating expenditure, which includes the full service. The fact that the price for the unit of cooling is fixed means, and that includes the electricity costs, means that the provider has now an incentive to reduce the consumption of electricity of that system, because then he's basically reducing the cost to deliver that service. So there's a strong incentive for the provider now to optimize this equipment, so to install the most efficient system and also to offer excellent maintenance to make sure the efficiency stays that high. And the model includes some capitalization mechanisms, which we will talk about later. I just want to quickly mention the difference between cooling as a service and other models. ESCO models is a model that many people know about, and it's normally energy performance contracts in which the payments are tied to the savings. In cooling as a service, there's no link between payment and savings. The payment is only linked to the consumption of the cooling. And district cooling is similar to cooling as a service, but it's one central plant that offers cooling to many buildings. And in this case, we're talking about one plant for one building. The key actors involved are clients. So clients as in buildings, enterprises. So cooling users is a more appropriate name. Technology providers or solution providers, and banks or investors. For cooling users, there is, of course, the clear advantage that there's no more capital expenditure, and there's a significant reduction in operating expenses because they're now operating a cooling equipment that is actually consuming much less energy, which means that the overall cost for that service is lower than what they used to pay. The service is off balance sheet, and the performance risk is totally shifted to the provider. And in addition, there's really a full outsourcing of the service, which means that the customer can just simply focus on their core business. For technology providers, it is also very interesting because they can really deploy the full potential of the technology because they're the one operating, they're the one that really manage the system, and they're the one that know the system best. So it's really their best place to manage or to operate the system in the best manner. And also providers can have predictable and continuous revenue streams, which was not necessarily the case before, where there were no long-term contracts involved. And of course, it increases also the demand for more energy efficient solutions. Banks and investors are also interested in this vehicle because it's an opportunity for them to place green funding. Many banks and investors have funding available for green projects, but the projects are not always bankable. And this really means now that it's a way to make these projects much more accessible for financiers. And this also is why we are very much involved in discussions with financiers. Very quickly on the funding structure, there are two ways here that we present. One is the sale and lease back. So this means funding structure means what happens once you want to scale up. So in this one, you can see that the provider is basically signing a contract, a cooling as a service contract with customers, and is then selling that equipment to a bank and leasing it back from that bank, which is an injection of capital for that provider. And payment guarantees could reduce the default risk that the provider is exposed to. This one is a more classical one, special purpose vehicle. This is based on project finance. And this is basically an investor that sets up what we call a special purpose vehicle, which purchases the equipment, and that vehicle will be the one signing the contract with the client. And this vehicle then also signs a contract with the provider who offers this service. And I can go into more detail maybe at another stage. Unfortunately, we do not have that much time to explain this in detail, but we will share this and I'm available for questions. This is about the Cooling as a Service initiative. So we at BASE, in collaboration with KSEP, have been supporting the markets to adopt this model. And there are a couple of components that were included in this initiative. The first one has been developing tools that enable the model, such as cooling as a service contracts and pricing models and financial structures. Secondly, we have been working with different technology providers and investors across the world to implement and pilot the model, currently in different countries that I will show actually later on a map. We have started a partnership with different of stakeholders that are involved with Cooling as a Service to create what we call the Cooling as a Service Alliance, and we have now more than 40 members. And we have been organizing several awareness-raising campaigns, such as matchmaking events, workshops, different webinars, writing articles, and we're working on some podcasts as well to really make the broader audience aware of this model and the opportunity for all stakeholders. There's a website here, CAST Initiative, which you can look at, which has most of the information and the events, including this webinar and further webinars. This is quickly an overview of one of the tools, or one of the results of one of the tools. I mentioned economic models, and this shows here that cooling as a service can be really the cheapest option for the end user. So the idea is not to have the end users should be saving money, right? This is not just about saving the environment. Of course, this is fundamental, and we want to reach net zero buildings, but it's also about saving money. And cooling as a service, because it uses very efficient equipment, actually ends up being a cheaper solution for the user. And for the implementation, I mentioned before that we are working with providers and investment funds to work in different countries to pilot the model. And so we're working in Mexico, in Dominican Republic, in Jamaica, Grenada, in Argentina, Nigeria, South Africa, India. And MGM Innova, which is also in this webinar, has been implementing cooling as a service in Colombia. And Martin and Chris, who are also speakers in this webinar, are the respective representatives of BGH, who is implementing cooling as a service in Argentina, and Grupo Clima, who is implementing the model in Costa Rica, which I might not have mentioned just before. Okay, so the Alliance, you are free to join the Alliance and to register to our newsletter. We try to provide interesting information and updates about our work. It's very easy. We will also send you a thank you email in which you can click on that link, or you can send us an email directly. And you can also join the Alliance, which means you will also be exposed on the website. And the idea there is to share lessons learned, to spread the word about the model, and to show that there's really an agreement between stakeholders about what cooling as a service is and how we can implement it. So this is it for me. I tried to keep it short, but I'm available for questions later. And I'll now give the word back to Carla, who will introduce the following speaker. And my email is there, and we'll also give it in the email. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I would like to remind all participants about the possibility to make questions via the chat room in the control panel. Let us know to whom you're asking the question, please, and this will be answered at the end of all the presentations. I would like now to welcome Chris Elizondo. Chris, if you could connect your video. Chris Elizondo is the General Manager of Clima Ideal, one of the companies of Grupo Clima, a holding leader in the HVAC sector in Central America and the Caribbean. Grupo Clima is a Costa Rican business group with over 50 years of experience in air conditioning, refrigeration, building, automation systems, and electromechanical installations. In these years, as one of the largest contractors in the region, Grupo Clima has participated in some of the most important projects of the Costa Rican economy. About 15 years ago, it started working on buildings that optimize controllability, and comfort for the users. Nowadays, its service also focuses on energy savings as providers of the latest technology and integrating building automation, involving HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and other systems. So welcome, Chris. A pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Carla. And it's a pleasure to join all of you in this webinar. And first, I hope everyone, you and your families, are safe and healthy in the middle of this COVID-19 crisis. Okay. First, I would like to tell you a little about who we are. Grupo Clima is a Costa Rican business group with over 50 years of experience in air conditioning, refrigeration, building automation systems, and electromechanical installations. We participate in all the segments of the industry, industrial, hospitality, office centers, hospitals, clean rooms, data centers, supermarkets, residential, and banking and commerce. Well, with 50 years of history, as one of the largest contractors in the region, Grupo Clima has participated in some of the most important projects in the country. And here we have some examples. We participate in all the international airports in the country. We also are in the biggest hotels. And in here we have, in the 2014, we were in the Hospital of La Anexión, Hospital of Trauma, and right now we're working in the new Turrialbas Hospital. Also, Grupo Clima is the contractor that leads the Central American market according to the ACR Latin Americans report of the top 100 installation contractors in Latin America. And well, Grupo Clima is a holding of 4 companies. The biggest one is Clima Ideal, that is air conditioning systems, and we are dealers of Carrier for more than 45 years. We also have Transclima, that is a leader in refrigeration systems, works with refrigeration solutions for the cold chain industry, and also is dealer of Carrier Transico for more than 28 years. ISA Controles, that is energy efficiency solutions for buildings and facilities, remote monitoring solutions, BMS, building security, voice and data systems, and so masking. And CME, that is construction services for all electromechanical and mechanical systems, fire suppression, electrical systems, and industrial assembles. Our business portfolio and the range of products we have allow us to offer the perfect solution for each project requirement. And something that makes us proud is our service department. Considered the largest in the region and probably one of the largest in, the largest in the country, and probably is one of the largest in the region. We have more than 400 maintenance contracts in the country. We have more than 100 technicians within the company. And of course, we have the service 24/7 all the year. So starting to talk about the main topic of this webinar. A part of a corporate strategy, a couple of years ago, the group was looking for innovative solutions for our clients, such as district cooling and cooling as a service. We believe in the correct management of the environment by designing energy efficiency solutions for our clients with the use of friendly refrigerants. And how Thomas mentioned, this year, Grupo Clima has been selected by BASE as one of the 5 companies that will be supported through their managed CAS incubator. These include assistance on technical, legal, and financial aspects, including contractual arrangements, pricing strategy, financial structuring, risk mitigations, mechanisms, and other. And we have been asked to share our experience so far with the implementation of the CAS model. So our experience in this process with BASE has been very professional, with a dedicated work team, with great commitment for the key aspects of the process, to ensure each opportunity turns into a successful and innovative project. At this time, we are reviewing legal contracts and making webinars with BASE and clients looking for the potential candidates in our pipeline. So during the last months, in our experience, the main benefits that customers have seen from these models are the no initial investment, the value creation, and the energy efficiency. With so much uncertainty, the client can invest in the core business instead of spending on cooling. More value is generated by efficient equipment, monitoring, operation, and maintenance, all in the same offer. And this model focuses on generating efficiencies and energy savings with 100% benefit for the customer. And what are the challenges from the contractor's point of view for the implementation of CAS? First, the design and engineering. CAS is based on an efficient design and an analysis of the best solution for the customer. Second, the technology and equipment. CAS seeks to install the latest technology available on the market. The installation and the commissioning. The contractor must be qualified to do the proper installation as well as the requirement commissionings of the project. Automation and monitoring. Cooling as a service requires monitoring service to track performance and energy consumption of the systems. Operation and maintenance. Also in here, the model requires a qualified contractor to operate and properly maintain the equipment through all its useful life. And finally, but not less important, the warranty and the support. It is key to have the correct support in the country that can respond quickly to the situation that arises daily. So our conclusion is that it's very important to have a one-stop shop for technology, installation, efficiency, and support. And we believe that Grupo Clima and Carrier offer the best alternative as cooling as a service in Costa Rica. And to finish, a final thought. Our experience with customers have taught us that it's not only about offering the latest technology from a manufacturer. It is having the right support in the country and a consolidated service department what makes the difference. So thank you very much. This is my presentation for today. I can answer questions at the end.
Thank you, Chris. It was a really good presentation. And as you said, we are going to leave questions for the end. So again, I encourage people to please make your questions in the chat room. Now, I would like to welcome Martin Mendez. Martin is product manager of the Smart Division of BGH in Argentina. He is responsible for the development of businesses focused on integrated solutions encompassing energy efficiency and smart buildings for the private and public sectors. Grupo BGH boasts 106 years of innovation, development, and commercialization of cutting-edge technologies, products, and services. It provides answers to the needs of businesses, public organizations, and customers across Latin America and Africa. The company has 4 business units, one of them being the BGH EcoSmart, that develops energy efficiency and smart business solutions. So, welcome, Martin. Please go ahead.
Hey, thank you very much, Carla. First of all, thank you very much to BASE for choosing us, and thank you very much for to World Green Building Council for giving us this space to communicate. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about Grupo BGH. Grupo BGH, as Carla said, is the longest standing technology leader commercializing technological vanguard products and services in Argentina, and we give answer to company needs, public sector, and also final customers, both from Latin America and from Africa. The history is very long. I'm not going to read each one of those milestones, but as I told you, we are a 106-year company, and our strength is that we've always have the strongest partners. Okay, you can check there below, like Mitsubishi Electric, Lennox for air conditioning, but also Motorola, Basel, Huawei, Samsung, and several leader brands in the industry. Grupo BGH has several divisions. These are the main ones, with BGH Consumer, BGH Tech Partner, BGH EcoSmart, and Positivo BGH. I will tell you very shortly what each one of these does. The operations. We have operations in Argentina, Chile, Peru, Uruguay, then another division, Tech Partner, also in those countries, and in Brazil. Then Positivo BGH, it's a joint venture between a Brazilian company and BGH. We have operations in Kenya, Rwanda, Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil. And BGH EcoSmart, so far we have in Argentina. We are manufacturers. We handle our own brand, and we also make OEM. We have a 42,000 square meters facility in Rio Grande, the south of our country, in Tierra del Fuego, that opened in 2009 with a total investment of over $80 million. We also have a distribution center in Buenos Aires, 50 kilometers away from the capital. It's a 25,000 meters squared where we handle all the logistics of our company and our customers. BGH Consumer are all the home appliances. We are leaders in this segment in the country with our own brand, BGH brand, and we also handle other brands like Alaska, Likon, Hisense, that's worldwide known, Telefunken, and Beko. We focus mainly in home appliances from the air conditioning segment, TV, residential heating, kitchen, and white goods. Then we have a division, BGH Tech Partner. This division is mainly focused in government solutions and company solutions related to IoT, communications, connectivity, infrastructure, data center, consulting, and cloud solutions. And last but not least, EcoSmart. This is the division where I work at. EcoSmart was created, let's say, like 2 or 3 years ago. At first, it was only a division focused on HVAC. But due to the following aspects that I would like to show you to highlight, we noticed that building operations and construction is responsible for the 39% of all carbon emissions worldwide. We also saw that in Argentina, companies are responsible for 40% of the energy consumption at country level. And then we realized and we learned that the cleanest and cheapest energy is the one we don't use. It is cheaper saving energy than producing it. And there was an Argentinian law that states that by December 31st of 2025, companies must achieve a contribution from renewable energy sources to reach 20% of the national electrical energy consumption. Therefore, companies will need to implement practices for energy saving becoming a need. We also noticed that we focus on offices, right? And we wanted to know which are the most important consumption of energy in these buildings. And we learned that 47% of the energy consumption in a building is from the HVAC and 26% from the lighting. Okay, so those two together are almost 70% of the segments that generate the consumption of energy in an office. So we decided we should focus there. That is why BGH EcoSmart is a group business dedicated to develop energy efficiency solutions for companies, governments, and other organizations, where we integrate HVAC, lighting products, and services. We have more than 55 years of experience developing HVAC solutions. Our division has more than 30 professionals with architects, engineers, and technicians, and we have more than 400 customers at country level. And what we do is add value with innovation, customer-oriented, and excellent. Nowadays, we're focused in HVAC, where we handle a complete portfolio with a local company with the biggest portfolio to offer in Argentina, where we handle the commercial, light commercial, and residential portfolio. And we are partners, exclusive distributors of Mitsubishi Electric brand and Lennox brand that are high-tier brand with very high efficiency standards. We also developed the lighting business focused on commercial, industrial, and urban solutions with our partner Schroeder. Also, Schroeder is a high-tier partner with products with very, very high efficiency and innovative solutions. And then we focus in energy efficiency in our customers, where we can do consulting and add value and give them business solutions. And then we noticed we had to integrate all of this, right? If we're responsible of more than 70% of the consumption from a building, we need to be able to integrate. That's why we are developing the BMS portfolio, right? In order to guarantee a smart building management, to control, to detect failure, to understand a real-time consumption, to be able to make a predictive and corrective maintenance, and to know our inventory and ambiental variables. What we do nowadays, when we have a building, we can make the consulting, right? We can also make the project design. We can provide with all the system and equipments nowadays with HVAC and lighting. We can be in charge of the assembly and installation of the units. We can make the startup and then the after-sales service. But always very important, we focus very much in trainings. We train our personnel involved in all project stages: installation, commissioning, operation, and use. And then the maintenance. We can also offer a solution of maintenance once we already sold the project and installed it. This is a very brief, our portfolio in HVAC with the different segments. What's important here is that we can provide solution for mostly all the industries: hotel, office, hospital, shops, large areas, entertainment, residential. Okay, for those who don't know much about Argentina. Argentina has a gross domestic product of approximately 470 billion, and Argentina is one of the largest economies in Latin America. Argentina is currently in a precarious economic balance. You know, the peso devalued significantly in 2019, and we're with an annual inflation that is over 50%, and our GDP has contracted 2.5 in 2018 and 2.5 more in the first half of 2019. So we're kind of in the middle of the crisis. And then we learned that the Development Bank of Latin America conducted a study to identify the subsectors and strategic measures that must be advanced in our country. given its economic reality. The study focused on private initiatives that may flourish in the commercial and industrial subsectors. And they made a list of 12 factors where we should work, the country should work to improve and to help with this crisis. And the number 10 was changing the current air conditioning equipment by high efficiency one. Well, what I mentioned before about Argentina, and now with this pandemic, right, with the COVID, we see that in every crisis there is also danger, but also an opportunity. And that is where we welcome very well cooling as a service solution. And we see it as an excellent and innovative alternative to encourage new and more efficient technology. Why? Companies now are reducing their budgets, right? They are either not changing their AC, or they are using the cheapest solutions and focusing on initial investment rather than operational costs. Also in Argentina, let me tell you, unfortunately, there is very little consciousness on energy efficient solutions. People are not very much aware about that. Companies want to reduce their problems. They don't want to be thinking on the maintenance solutions, right? They want to have a solution. Actual COVID pandemic will stress worldwide companies. Therefore, investments on local branches, we believe, will be much tougher, right? Because the company will have problems in their own place. So it will be much harder to ask for investments in local branch here in Argentina. Also, we believe that CAS will increase a lot the trust on the offered solution, right? Because we are so sure that the solution we offer with these units, with this installation, and with this maintenance, we're so sure that it's good that we take full responsibility. And then for us, it is very important because our reputation in the market is very important. And CAS gives us the possibility of taking care of our own brand because we are the responsible for making it work. And another aspect is the commercial aspect. CAS will enable us to make long and close-term relationships with our customers because if we compare to another model where we just sell the units, we sell them once and it's very hard to keep the contact with our customer. With CAS solution, we have a constant contact with our customer. Why we believe we can do it very well? Because all I told you previously, right? We have an excellent know-how. We have a leading brand in the HVAC industry, both with BGH brand, with Mitsubishi Electric, and with Lennox and Schroeder. We have the most complete product portfolio with our air conditioning and with our building management solution. And we have strategic partners, both nationwide, to make the assessment in the whole country, the installation and maintenance. And we also have worldwide partners in order to provide this turnkey solution. According to our business, right, our actual customers, we believe we can focus at this moment mainly in hotels, retail stores, entertainment, and corporate buildings. Those are the main cases and industries where we will focus to offer the CAS solution. Okay, well, thank you very much. And if you have any question, remember you can put it in the panel and at the end we can answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. So now I'd like to welcome our last speaker, Alfredo Nicastro. Alfredo has over 30 years of experience and he's currently a Senior Vice President of Global Operations of MGM Innova Consulting, an Environmental and Social Officer for the MGM Sustainable Energy Fund II. MGM Innova Group provides integrated environmental, financial, and technical solutions that contribute to sustainable energy management and climate change mitigation and adaptation. MGM's Sustainable Energy Fund is a private equity fund that focuses on equity and mezzanine financing for projects in the energy efficiency and renewable energy sectors in Latin America and the Caribbean. A pleasure to have you here, Alfredo. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Carla. Appreciate the introduction, and thanks also the previous colleagues for setting up the stage so nicely. It's a pleasure to be talking to all of you, connecting from different parts of the region and the world, and hopefully the safety of your homes in social distancing. Technology today allows us to do this kind of stuff. No? Even though it's never imagined that I would say that someday I would be socially distancing, working from home. But anyway, it's a challenge and we are up to it. So let's face it all together. Well, thanks to the award Green Business Council and also to Bays and Cas, Thomas, for inviting us for this great opportunity to discuss with you about this interesting model. Cooling as a service, we believe it's a great tool that enable us as investors and service providers, technology providers in the region and in the world to help customers lower their costs and improve their sustainability of their operations. Well, very quickly about the MGM Innova Group. MGM Innova Group is a group basically formed by three companies that focus in providing technical, financial, and environmental solutions that support not only the sustainable use of energy, but also contribute to the climate change mitigation and adaptation. And how this all came about. MGM Innova Consulting, one of the companies in the group, it's a legacy company from MGM International that it started operations early in the year 2000, so a little over 20 years ago, that used to develop emission reduction projects under the Kyoto Protocol and also CO2 emission reduction platforms. So the company focused the first few years, the first 8 years of operations on that arena, basically developing that kind of projects all over the world, and we're one of the three top developers during that time frame. Towards the end of the 2010 decade, we anticipated that with the end of the Kyoto Protocol, we will need to set up look for another financial mechanism to keep developing these climate change mitigation projects, right? So MGM started discussing with other players in the market, and naturally, most of those players were development banks from different countries and financial players that were already in the market, and decided to move forward and set up our own fund. So very quickly, MGM Innova Consulting is the legacy company. We do still a lot of our climate change consulting work. MGM Innova Energy Services is our branch that has our technical resources that help us implement, operate, and monitor all the projects implemented by the fund. And MGM Innova Capital is a general partner, is a fund manager that currently manages two funds, the MSF1, which is the fund that we created originally, and MSF2 that is in full force right now. I'm gonna provide a little more details as we move along. So MGM Innova Capital, as I said, is a general partner, a fund manager. It's a private equity and green infrastructure investment firm that focus on socially responsible projects in Latin America. It is very critical for us that we invest only in projects that have a climate component, that reduce emissions, do not add emissions to the planet, right? So we look for sustainable projects on that perspective as well. Very quickly about the two funds that we have. As I said, MSF1, the original fund, was a smaller fund. It was a $65 million fund, more or less. We ended up investing with a little debt around $73.4 million. As you can see, most of the investors there are development banks, cooperation agencies from different countries in the world, Japan, Germany, Spain, US, the European Union, Colombia, and that fund is fully deployed right now. So we have our funds fully invested. We are now in the divestment period of that fund. It's a 10-year fund, 5 years that we use for investment, and 5 years now for divestment. The MSF2 is the one that is fully operational right now in the investment period. We already have $120 million raised and available to deploy. And we are doing additional capital raise, and we expect to close around 150, maybe a little less or more throughout the end of this first half of the year. Investors, as you see, some of the investors are the same from Fund 1, and we have a few other ones that are just joined, like Bio from Belgium, FMO, Proparco, and as new investors in this fund. Okay, the focus of the fund is Latin American and Caribbean. We can do a little bit of investment in Asia, but it's very focused to a specific niche. And we also focus on energy efficiency and energy services and renewable energy. Different sectors, we don't have any restriction sectors. We will look for projects into any of those sectors, industrial, commercial, municipal. And on renewable energy, our main focus is on solar distributed generation for auto consumption, but we also do some small hydro and some landfill gas to energy and biogas to energy projects. We also do cogeneration and waste heat recovery, either through natural gas or biomass sources. Okay, so a little bit of our the way that we operate and the features of our investment. The way we see ourselves, we are not only an investor, we are also a solutions provider, because we provide solutions from cradle to the grave. Cradle to the grave, sorry. So from early stages, preliminary studies and engineering, basic engineering, up to implementation of the project's operation and maintenance monitoring, we do it all, okay? Typically, we can do up to 100% of the investment. We don't have requirements for capital contribution from our clients, local counterparts. We don't have to put 100% of the investment. We can do co-investment as well. We are open, we are very flexible. Once again, we invest in every single component from preliminary studies down to the O&M as well. Taking the full service approach, which allow our clients to focus on their primary activities while we do handle the implementation of the project and the operations maintenance as well. That is very interesting because it basically frees up capital from our clients, the partners. It allows them once again to focus on their operations. And a very important component is that as you do that, as we do the investment, we do this as an off-balance sheet transaction, right? Which allows us to preserve the client's balance sheet and do not affect the debt capacity. They don't have to get that because we provide 100% of the investment, typically as an equity investment. It also allows them to transfer that asset that would be in their books as an investment, as an asset. They transfer that as an OPEX cost, okay, as a cost, which has a benefit, also a tax benefit at the end of the day, as it reduces the profit and you can basically deduct from your income tax. So there's a benefit there as well. Contract terms, we can go up to 10 years typically because it's a 10-year fund. We may be able to structure contracts for longer terms. That's typical in renewable energy projects, but typically is within 10 years, 7, 8, 6, very commonly for energy efficiency projects. Another thing is that by doing the way we do it, by owing the assets of the project, we typically don't require guarantees or collaterals. Of course, it all depends on the financial health of the client, of the local counterpart, capacity to pay, and all of that. But basically, we try to structure it in a way that they don't have to offer guarantees or collaterals. At the end of the contract term, the assets are transferred to the client, and we can also have an early exit clause if required by our client to review together in a certain point of the project, just exit and the contract. Okay, so that's typically how we structure our contracts. I'm going to be focusing primarily on our services model, cooling as a service, but I wanted to point out that the primary three financial and contracting mechanisms that we see in the industry. The first one is shared savings, very typical for ESCOs. There's also the high efficiency energy infrastructure. Basically, you put together an infrastructure and you lease that infrastructure, or you do a long-term sale and purchase agreement, or you do equipment rental, and we do that a lot. And what I want to focus today is basically the high efficiency energy services. Why I'm not saying CAS only, because that can be done not only for cold, for cooling, but it can also be done for heat. For example, you can sell hot water, you can sell steam, or you can sell electricity. So there's other energy services contracts that are not necessarily applied to cold. Okay, so cooling as a service is the one that I'm going to be focusing today. So we can basically do those three. The shared savings is not very easy, not very common for an investor like us. It's very hard to monitor and to build. Has not been proven successful for us, but the leasing, sale, and purchase and rental and CAS have been proven very successful. Okay. The perspectives of us as an investor or an energy services provider, the CAS model, the service model, is definitely a trend in Latin America. We have been seeing that more and more every day, but it implies an important cultural change, right? If people are not used to paying for cold water or for air conditioning services, they're very used to paying for electricity on a monthly basis, but not for steam or hot water or cold air, cold water. So it implies an important cultural change. It definitely characterizes, configures a new niche of opportunity, right? There's a lot of interest today from the clients to pay for these services on a monthly basis, to pay for the actual consumed cold water or tons of refrigeration per month, instead of paying for a full facility that they are not going to use necessarily in full. So it's a trend, and it's an opportunity that we are exploring and trying to incorporate more and more into our business. Also, the model, the services model, CAS, if properly structured, can reduce the risk profile of the investment. Okay, if you structure that properly, combining a fixed payment for asset remuneration with a variable payment for the consumed tons of refrigeration or hot water, and have a guaranteed floor to be sure that you recover your investment in a certain period of time, that you can minimize the risks while providing benefits to your clients. A challenge is that there is still not too many insurance or guarantee products available in the market, but we always have the possibility in a contract like this to interrupt service. So that strengthens the mechanism a little bit, but the fact that we don't have insurances and guarantees fully readily available are a challenge. There's a lot of risks that you need to mitigate contractually. They're possible to mitigate, but you need to do very, very strong contracts. For an example, low occupancy in a hotel or commercial building. If they are going to pay you for the consumed electricity and they are not selling the hotel capacity, maybe they're not going to be paying you enough. So you need to have a floor that ensures that you can recover the investment. But those are challenges that you have to look on a case-by-case basis. Seasonality, of course, affects it, as summer, high occupation of hotels, winter, low occupation in beach places. So you need to see how you mitigate all of that. Ownership of the assets, as I said, works as a partial guarantee of the investment. That's a strong aspect. And our expectation is that this model is going to be disseminated, and as it gets disseminated, the contracts are better structured, and of course, minimize risk for all the parties. I'm going to tell you a little bit now about a specific case study, a project that we developed in Colombia. It's an office building called Q Office in Medellin. Basically, this is a high efficiency central air conditioning system We have 2 magnetic chillers from Daikin, very efficient, 2 units of 290 tons of refrigeration each capacity. So Daikin, for an example, is one of the technology providers that we team up to implement those projects. Of course, we have to team up as well with companies like Grupo Clima or BGH also to help us implement the project, install, and provide maintenance. And MGM is basically a fund and integration company. We do not necessarily have our own construction installation team, O&M team. So we do that through alliances in the different localities. Of course, this project included everything from design, construction, installation, and also administration and O&M. This is a new building. It was being built when we installed our system, so it was a little longer term. It was a 2-year process, but it was very, very interesting. Basically, the way it works is that the administration of the building pays for administration fee and asset and part of the asset compensation, while the individual offices pay for their own consumed air conditioning services, for their consumed tons of refrigeration. So we're talking about 100 different offices. We build them every month, and they pay for their share of consumption, right? So it's an interesting project, very successful project. Cooling tariff includes all the associated costs, maintenance, guarantees, extended guarantees on the equipment, O&M fees, everything that is in there, insurance and parts, everything that is included. So you can always include electricity, that's the preferred model, the water that you use also in your chillers, all of the supplies, and also everything that is needed for your operation. It's a single services contract with the building administration, and then they have their own association regulation that includes the AC service. So the offices know that they have to pay for that service, and that's basically how it's handled. We don't have a separate contract. We don't have 100 different contracts with the different offices. So it's easier to operate in this way. Very quickly, because I know we are getting close to the end of the time here. This is a typical investment structure for energy services contract. I'm going to use the Q office case to explain a bit better. So this is a cooling as a service project. The MGM Capital and MSCF, they're based in US and Canada. So it's an offshore operation. This is all pre-construction. This entity, the MSCF, forms typically forms an SPV, which is basically a contract mechanism, so we can operate all the project. And what we do, we capitalize the SPV, we put equity on the SPV. In this specific project, the MSCF has a partnership with Aire Verde, which is a local company in Colombia, who also have a little stake on that project. Aire Verde was responsible for the part of the design, also installation and construction. So they are a partner also for O&M. So MGM has 80% equity, Aire Verde 20. We capitalize that company, and that company contracts with the client through an energy services contract, a cooling as a service contract, and also with all the parties. So MGM Innova Group is the integrator. We integrate through MGM Energy Services in this case, for the design, construction, installation, monitoring, O&M. So MGM Energy Services is going to integrate, supervise subcontractors, and deal with service and technology providers. So at the end of the day, once the project is up and running, we are going to, of course, bill on a monthly basis, and QOFs pay us for the services rendered. And once it's all said and done, we distribute dividends to MSCF and Aire Verde to compensate for the investment. That's a typical investment structure. We can talk in details if you want on a separate call. I'll be glad to discuss with you guys. So, of course, many benefits. Initial ones we can think is energy savings. In this case, the project saves about $5.3 million during the life of the project. It's a high cooling efficiency. You basically save a lot of electricity. In this case, it's almost 2 million kilowatt hour per year. The efficiency of the equipment is from 0.6 to 0.7 kilowatt hour per ton of refrigeration. We also produce emission reductions, greenhouse gas emission reductions. It's equivalent about 8,000 tons CO2 equivalent during the life of the project. We help create project jobs, sustainable project. We need to think about the social component as well. So during the implementation, we're talking about 40 active people involved in the project during the 2-year implementation period, and 7 personnel staff for the operation of the project for 20 years. It's very important as well because we're helping build this model in an industry that has a potential growth. We expect about 18% growth in air conditioning consumption increase in the next 10 years in Colombia. Okay, of course, there's many other benefits, but those are the critical ones. This is just a table with a few other examples. We have Q Office there. It's a cooling as a service project. We have done a few other projects, Colanta in Colombia as well, which is steam generation from biogas. So it's a sale of steam. Technoglass, which is a glass industry. We have a cogeneration 3 megawatt with natural gas, and we sell electricity. And Acerias Paz del Rio, also it's a steel company, so it's also cogeneration project for the sale of electricity. Okay, so we are based in the region. As I said, we have 5 regional offices in Brazil, Mexico, Costa Rica, Colombia, US, and also have project offices all over the region where we have projects implemented. We are very interested in looking for local partnerships and co-developing projects with anyone who would be interested in cooperating with us. So thanks once again, be safe, and I'll be available for calls for questions, I guess, now with the other speakers. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alfredo, and thanks to all our speakers. I would like to ask you to please turn on your videos to all speakers so we can address some of the questions. Thanks for everyone who has sent questions, and if you still have some questions, please don't hesitate and just type them in the chat. Otherwise, we can always, if we don't manage to answer them now, we can answer them via emails when we send a thank you note. Okay, so in this case, I would like to start with a question. I would say I'm going to address it to Thomas. The difference between applying CAS to public versus private buildings, do we see the same issues there, same barriers, or not?
So in principle, it's quite similar, as in from the way the mechanics work. There's not a key difference, but the main difference there will be the procurement processes. So we had discussions with different governments and also with so both at the federal, the government level, but also at the regional level. And very often the issue was that there are quite some stringent procurement measures, which means that it's not always easy to consider a service model as one of in the tender, basically. Maybe Alfredo has more experience on this.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Well, I would say that I agree with you. Basically, it would be the same system. One of the challenges that we as investors and a service provider face when dealing with public entities, not only of course the contracting process, but also in the region, sometimes we don't have very strong contracting mechanisms that are fail-proof, I would say, for example, for government transitions. An example, we have seen cases where you have a longer-term contract for a service, and then you have a change in administration, and sometimes that may affect your ability to charge and be paid for your service. So there's an additional risk component that you need to see how you mitigate contractually. We have contracts with municipalities where we provide lighting services, for an example, and there are some contractual mechanisms that ensure that we can get paid, but even with those mechanisms in place, it's a little challenging. So I guess it's more of a legal contracting challenge than the service model itself. It's fully applicable and with the right counterpart, I would say.
Okay, great, thank you. I would like to ask another question that it has to do, Alfredo, if you can address it at the beginning, and then I'm gonna jump to Chris and Martin. Given your experience, how easy or difficult has been to, or do you see, is to apply like cooling as a service or another kind of equipment as a service, like across the different Latin American countries and the Caribbean?
Well, I would say that this is it's not harder or easier than any other contracting mechanism. We face the same challenges that we face on a leasing contract. The additional component I would say is that it's a novelty. It's not typical that kind of a contracts in the region. So sometimes it takes a little longer to mature. You have to explain a little better the model. Of course, it's a cultural change that is implied, makes it a little difficult sometimes for people to understand. But if you're talking with major industries or big commercial buildings or with a supermarket chain, typically it's a little easier for them to understand and for you to negotiate. But once your partner, because we don't see the people in the other side of the contract as a client, we see them as a partners because you're going to be on the long term with them. Once they understand how it works and the benefits, it's an enabler, I would say. So it's just a matter of the cultural change and the new contract model that you have to overcome, and basically.
Perfect, thank you. So in that case, Chris and Martina, I would like to extend the question to you. Currently, we are working with supporting your work in Costa Rica in the case of Chris and Argentina in the case of Martin, but your companies at the same time have presence in different countries in Latin America. So in which countries would your groups be like, see that they're going to be offering CAS in the near future? What would be those markets? Where do you think you have the elements to be able to offer the service, not now, but in the near future? If you could start maybe.
Thank you. In the case of Grupo Clima, we are in Nicaragua and in Costa Rica only. So right now we are focused in Costa Rica for all the situation that we are living, economical and political, in Nicaragua. So we are really focused in extend this model in Costa Rica, and I'm totally agree with Alfredo, what he said. We need to work in a change of culture for our customers, but when they understand all the benefits, they are really interested in this model. I think the biggest challenge for the implementation of cooling as a service is to have all the qualified contractor for all the useful life of the project, right? Because they have a lot of questions about not only the initial investment or where is the brand that they're going to put in the initial months or in the first step of the project, but the real question is who is going to be with me the 10 years across. So that is the things that we have to work, and the clients ask a lot about the services, how it's going to work in the time, what happened at the end. So when they really understand all that questions, I think is the real and the better solutions, the better solution right now for all the customers.
Thank you, Chris. What about you, Martin? Any sort of ideas of where do you see like BGH developing?
In my case, we have operations in several countries, but actually for EcoSmart, we're now focused on Argentina, and we have all our network in Argentina. And anyhow, I do think that Argentina is one of the most appropriate to implement, because as I mentioned in my presentation, crisis is the same, is also opportunity. And Argentina is handling, and now tougher, will be handling a very tight and hard crisis. So I believe, as Chris and Alfredo said, we will have to explain it very well. But if we can make the customer understand the solution, I think it's going to be very interesting. I'm not sure if everyone will switch to this kind of solution. Certain customers will be interested, and they will appreciate that we, as a supplier, present a different model of making business, right? Not the standard one, but adjusting to the reality we are living nowadays. So I think it's going to be
perfect. Thank you. Another question that we have here.
If I
Sorry,
may,
Alfredo, go ahead. Yes,
if I may, I
Alfredo.
just want to add something else. I think an important thing about this model is reflected in the situation that we are living now, the contingencies associated with the COVID. It has demonstrated how susceptible we are and companies are through their operations to fixed costs. Okay, right? So it is very important that you manage your fixed costs in a way that you can minimize the impacts of the disruption in your operations, and how can you innovate in this contract models so you minimize the impact of disruptions in your production, in your cash flows associated with your fixed costs, right? So I think the CAS model, the energy services model, is very important because it minimizes the impact and also frees up equity. If someone has just made an investment in November last year and spent $10 million in a new cold water facility, chiller plant, that capital right now, that equity is very critical. They could be using that to sustain operations. So those are two things that I think we need to think in the region, that these kind of models free up capital, minimize impact in your debt capacity for when you need it, and also allows you to minimize the impacts of fixed costs in your operations.
Thanks, Alfredo. I would even say that they also help to align the incentives so each stakeholder behaves the best that it can behave on the topic that they have expertise. And in that regard, Thomas, I would like to ask you, why do we think that it's so important in the cooling as a service model to include the price of electricity, that it's paid by the provider as part of the whole package offered as a service?
Thank you, Carla, and to those who asked this question. It's a very important question, and we're asked this quite often. And the reason is the following. In cooling as a service, the fee that the customer pays depends only on the amount of cooling that the customer or user is consuming. And this fee is fixed and agreed upon in advance when the contract is signed. So within this fee, the provider is supposed to offer the equipment, the financing, the maintenance, operating. Now, that includes also electricity and water. And why? Because if these costs are included, that means that if the efficiency of the equipment ends up dropping or is lower than expected, and these electricity costs and water costs are higher than expected, then the client is not affected. Only the provider is affected by this increase in operating costs because he's the one paying for it. So it really creates an incentive for the provider to make sure the most efficient equipment is installed and to ensure excellent maintenance to make sure it's basically operated at the highest efficiency during the whole lifetime. So it's that's the reason behind this.
Excellent. Another question. I'm gonna like make a couple of additional questions. The other questions that we don't manage to address now online, we will address like via the email link that I mentioned before. And here would be one. It's like what would be the unit, the most efficient unit or the most well-suited unit of measurement for CAS? How would it be measured? And maybe in that case, I would like to ask Thomas, basically from like the concept view, and then Alfredo from his experience.
Sure. So as we have been working with different technology providers in implementing this, we work with different types of technologies. So the key technologies we've worked with are chiller systems or VRF systems, which are normally used for bigger buildings. In the case of chiller systems, the unit normally used is ton refrigeration. It's a unit that's mostly used for these chillers. And normally you measure this at what you call the delivery point, which is the point up to which the technology provider is responsible. And this, you basically need to measure the flow and the temperature, and this gives you the amount of cooling or ton refrigeration, and then you can price the service based on that. In the case of VRF, it can depend. Sometimes the ton refrigeration can also be used, or it will be the amount of liquid cooling refrigerant within the system. Alfredo, which unit have you used in Q Office?
Yeah, that's basically, well, in Q Office, it's basically a ton of refrigeration delivered or consumed by the client. So measure exactly as you said. at the point of delivery. So it's basically Colombian pesos per tons of refrigeration utilized per month.
Excellent. Alfredo, it's going to be the one before last question, is like, how does CAS aligns with the commissioning process and energy efficiency certifications, like, for example, LEED? Do you see them as competing or really working together?
They work together. This Q office project is a LEED certified building. So basically, we are aggregating to this to the system, because we are implementing a project that is energy efficient, will deliver environmental and social benefits. So it's actually complementary. It was a very smooth process for the Q office project. So I see them as complementary. I don't see any problems. We can collaborate with the auditors that come to inspect the building, and to facilitate inspection of that particular part of the LEED certification. So I think they are complementary, and this strengthens the facility for a potential certification.
Okay, and then I would like to make the last question now live for like Chris and Martin, and it has to do basically with like the mandate that we have as base to like at the end work on the development of cooling as a service response to like the Kigali amendment to the Montreal Protocol, and it's the phase out of like more dirty refrigerants. So I would like, and this clearly is being phased out at different rates in different countries. So how do you see like cooling as a service helping you as businesses transitioning from those more dirty refrigerants to the more clean refrigerants?
Okay, I think cooling as a service really work together with this initiative, because one of the things that you have to use in this model is the latest technology, and it based in the latest equipment and the latest technology that are in the market. And with that, we're working with friendly refrigerants, and we are motivated that the client change the old equipment that they have in the projects for new ones. And probably they don't do it before because of the invest, because they need to invest in the core business, and they prefer to stay with the old equipment in cooling. So with cooling as a service, they have a tool for change easier the equipment and put the latest technology. And with that, we are contributed with the change and motivated the change in the country and in all the places that we put cooling as a service.
Thanks, Chris. Martin, any compliments?
In my case, I think it's the best, because the one who will be interested in putting the latest technology will be us, not the customer, because I will be the one defending the cost of electricity, electricity consumption. So I will choose the technology instead of the customer. So I believe it's going to be much better.
Thank you. So basically, with all like these very interesting questions and answers, there were still some questions that we didn't manage to answer live, but we will do that. I wanna like close the webinar, not before thanking the presenters, of course, all the participants, but in particular to the World Green Building Council. As part of the partnership between BASE and the Americas Regional Network of the World Green Building Council, we have had the opportunity to produce this webinar. And as a closing remark, I'd like to invite you to look at our website, the CAAS-initiative.org, for any kind of additional information, and also for reaching to us if needed. And the most important message I would say now is that we really hope to see you in another future event that we organize. But now please stay safe and healthy. That I think is the most important thing for everyone. And we really appreciate the fact that you took some time to like join us in this webinar. Good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to all our speakers and all the participants that joined this WorldGBC and BASE webinar. We had a great group of attendees, so Just so you know, we will be sharing the presentations and also the recording of the webinar, and we will, as Carla mentioned, send some further detailed information to all of you. So thank you again for joining, and stay safe.